impact on the way we do moral theology today. Okay, and I would like that you try to analyze this with me and see if you agree. Okay, the first, as you see, already posted here. Um, I think everyone would agree that we live in a world where there is so much complexities. No? There is a complexity in the way uh, we would pursue, we would respond, we would live a moral life in our world today. Okay. First, where do we find expressions of such complexity? First, you could say that that is something already visible in within us itself, no, within each person, and that is something more or less that is more and more recognized today. There are gray areas in our moral life, no, even as a person. Okay, okay. Before, especially uh, before modernity came, okay, uh, there seemed to be very clear delineation between what is right and what is wrong. And even, for example, if you read literature or like epics, for example, before modernity, the kind of literature that flourished during the time were epics, okay? And in such narratives, you would see that a particular person is always portrayed either as very, very good, okay? And while another person is portrayed as very bad. So you speak of a hero on the one hand, okay? A holy person, an excellent individual, a model in our community, for example, on the one hand, that typifies the excellences somehow that are expected of a particular tradition, okay? And you call them heroes, etc. And in such narratives, you will always have some people portrayed as the villain, people who are, taken over by greed, by evil intentions, etc. Do you agree? That used to be the way things are portrayed. But nowadays, if you're going to take a look at literature, particularly novels, and even in telenovelas, for example, you do not see very often such type of delineation that we used to see, before modernity. Okay. Now, generally, people are portrayed always having both a combination of, on the one hand, goodness with some good intentions, but always mixed up, with certain issues and all that. That in one particular person, you would have a constant conflict and interplay of what are the forces that somehow people would identify as bad or evil, or something that would be identified as something that is good. So within our human persons, we become more honest and become more faithful to the reality that our own nature will always be constitutive and constituted of such realities. Okay? I remember, I don't know if there was only one telenovela that I watched here, because it was actually a telenovela that was actually shot in Sampore de San Vicente de Paul. Okay, it was about, I think, Dahil sa Pag-ibig. I think it's about the story of somebody, of Piolo Pascual, who was a seminarian, became a priest, etc. And he had somebody who took care of him, but who adopted him only, like si Christopher de Leon. And then there was another a woman there, and he had a brother actually who was separated from him, Jericho Rosales. And here you'd see every single person in that particular telenovela would have very good, very good characters, very good person, and very good characteristics in themselves. But at the same time, the telenovela would portray that in each of those persons, you would also have something profoundly bad and evil in their character. You know, so there's a constant tension that you see there. Okay, that's one reality. And one very well-known philosopher, okay, uh, her name is Martha Nussbaum, okay, um, she wrote uh, a book which was the result of her studies, philological studies of Greek literature and philosophy. Okay, uh, and she wrote The Fragility of Goodness. You could see that here, even in the way individuals have to grapple with their own lives, there is a claim that even with or without our intention, somehow goodness that we want to pursue, that we want to become, somehow is really very fragile. It can actually, at one instance, uh, destroy us, no? Certain intentions, certain behaviors, certain point of weakness that we experience may actually give way to particular destruction of our moral character, for that matter. So goodness in itself is not something that we always uh, could speak about as untouched by the reality of evil, but it is actually something that emerges out of that reality, okay, that we see in our lives and in our world. And from without, from outside our context, we say we live in a world that has also become so complex, especially because of globalization. I wanted you to read another beautiful article on globalization and the call for autonomous ethics, because it gives a very good picture of how pluralistic and how multicultural and how polycentric our world has become. When you say polycentric, okay, there are many different centers, and the difficulty of people coming to agreement on one particular monolithic appreciation of tradition is not anymore to be found today. Okay, that in the world we live, it is on the one hand, searching to become one. It's like a village. Uh, Globalization celebrates the fact that in our own differences we could be one. Technology has brought us the world uh, almost uh, into a village, very close to one another. That's a reality, isn't it? What would take, for example, a letter to arrive from Spain to the Philippines for 6 months during the time in the early part of the colonization, now instantly you could communicate, isn't it? So in a way, it's supposed to bring the world together. Okay, in the way some people who actually prophesy that, for example, uh, some people were thinking that the world will be bound as one. Okay, through networks of communications. Okay, uh, Teilhard de Chardin himself was talking about that early on in the last century. Okay, but at the same time, just as we see that the world is getting like a village, when what goes on in the other part of the globe we get to know and understand, it also has become so fragmented. Okay, we live in a world where you know divisions of all kinds, conflicts of all sorts happen. Okay, and within these realities, okay, there will be a lot of moral questions that arise that will not be very easy to respond to. Okay, for example, even in the Philippine context, okay, there are so many issues. How do you position yourself? How do we understand this? What would be more important? What would be the priorities should we give to particular realities? When people, for example, talk about the way the government deals with drug addiction, for example, it is not so easy to be able to settle on a lot of issues. When we, for example, talk about this pandemic, how do we deal with this? There are so many different opinions that are conflicting in the world we live. This simply shows that uh, we live in a very complex world, especially the reality of of globalization, for example, making us uh, mingle with many different cultures in one particular space. Before, for example, in Papua New Guinea, you have one particular community all by yourself, isn't it? And it is easier to think about what is good and what is bad. But it's so easy to be able to think about what people can agree about. But now you have people, for example, coming from, even in the seminary now, even our School of Theology, we have people coming from different cultures, and they're actually raised, with different moral sensibilities. And this somehow uh, have made our reality a little bit more complex. Okay? So that's one reality that imposes a challenge in the way we do moral theology today. That's the first important challenge. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Father.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, the second point that I would like to raise, okay, is uh, that in our in the complexity of the world we live, okay, we this is characteristically evident in the way uh, morality somehow uh, uh, defines itself. What is really good and what is really bad? We see that there have been a lot of conflicting moral visions and ethical perspectives. Some people, like Alice Dyer McIntyre, would speak about our social landscape as characterized by moral disarray. Of course, philosophically, he would explain because he wrote on the history of ethics, okay? And he would describe why we have come to the point that there have been a lot of conflicting moral perspectives and visions in our context today. And somehow they are incommensurable, which means people would never be able to really agree on anything. Okay? Maybe small pockets of people can agree, but in terms of a general direction, teleology, it becomes very difficult now, especially in our postmodern contexts. Our postmodern context, in fact, um, resists all forms of meta narrative. What do you mean by meta narrative? Yet, because before, especially with modernity, there was an attempt not to be able to talk about a big story of reason, of rationality, big story of justice, or big story of freedom, etc., that everybody had to agree because it had a very, very clear end, goal, and telos. Okay? But on the other hand, modernity, especially in the last century, because of its obsession to always pursue one end, had become most violent. Because of its obsession to pursue the one clearly, objectively defined goal, anyone who would not conform with that would have to be exterminated. That has happened in the ideologies of modernity. Are you with me? Yeah?
Yes, Father.
Yeah. So modern narrative somehow is speak about one grand story, one grand narrative. And precisely, postmodernity resisted that because the modern narrative, which actually was pursuing only one, had become so dangerous and eliminative of many other small voices that somehow offered a different perspectives. You get it? And so postmodernity was born out of that particular reality resisting and contesting the assumptions of the modern projects for one, okay, for one goal, for one end, ideologically pursued and defined. Okay? So now people would like to celebrate small narratives. Let's flourish within particular narratives and let every single voice be heard. Do you agree with that? What is the implication of that to the way we think about morality? What is the implication of that in the way we objectively pursue what is right and what is wrong? For example, what they say is right, according to my small narrative, it may not be very true because our experiences within this particular narrative tells us otherwise. And therefore, we cannot conform with that. You understand? And so when you allow flourishing of these small narratives, you can expect that there will be more ethical perspectives, differing visions, differing ends, etc., which necessarily would be able to get conflicts one way or another when they encounter each other. That seems to be how the world is moving forward. Okay, uh, be pluralistic, be multicultural, be sensitive to the differences, etc. Because according to one is historian, I don't know if you've heard about him, from Bulgaria, but eventually settled in Paris. His name is Todorov Svestan. He is a historian, Todorov Svestan. He, he is a historian who claims that the pursuit of one good end, at least during the period of modernity, was responsible for the great evils that have happened in the 20th century in particular. That's a very threatening statement, okay? That the pursuit of what is good actually was the one that brought about all sorts of evil in our world, okay? The two world wars, okay? The regime of Pol Pot, for example, the approach of Stalin, the Gulag Archipelago, the Cultural Revolution of Mao Zedong in China. All of these actually, were intended to pursue a beautiful end that they thought was best for their country, for their culture, for their tradition. And yet, in the process, they had to eliminate millions of people, starting with Hitler, okay, with Mussolini, etc. So that was how the world has taken on its ideological pursuit of an end. And because of that, the world has become more wounded and uh, and destroyed. No, and as a result, postmodernity came. But postmodernity has brought about a situation where there has become a moral disarray in our context. And within this context, we see, okay, that there are people who react to the situation on the one hand by becoming more conservative. We are now at a loss. Right? What's going on? What are the objective moral orders that we need to hold on and anchor our values, etc. And so some would take that position of conservatism. Let's go back to tradition. Let's go back to our own particular narrative and live our life within that narrative in a coherent way. You understand? So there are now, for example, even within the church, who go for that position. Let's go back. Modernity and postmodernity has caused a lot of trouble in our world, so we might as well go back to where we have always come from our traditions. Do you understand? Okay? But on the other hand, there are those who would say, no, the way we deal with this phenomena in the world is to be open and enter into dialogue, trying to understand what really goes on. And then within this particular context, how do we, in a way, re-articulate, reread our tradition and its values? Okay? And of course, as a result, because of differing opinions, okay, they become conflictive. And the more they become conflictive, the tendency, okay, is to become ideological. Okay? What we hold on is true. Okay? On the other hand, that what they hold on is also true. So, and once people begin to close their own minds to a particular system, we speak of that in terms of ideology. Okay? Kaya nga, ang result ng iba are postmodern doubts about what you hold as true or as false, as bad or good, etc. Okay. Uh, the whole danger in ideological project somehow could be appreciated by uh, the discussion done by Jean-Luc Marion. Can you write his name? John, G Jean Luc, then Marion, Mario N. He's a French phenomenologist. Okay? According to Jean-Luc Marion, when we speak about systems of rationality, okay, actually he was applying this in his theodicy, in the way we conceive about God, but something, a framework that we could apply in the way we understand social systems in our world. And that's what I'm doing. Okay, here uh, he speaks about the difference between an icon and an idol. Can you say that? Icon and idol. What is the difference? Yes. What is the difference between an icon and an idol? According to him, okay, the way we look at reality, like systems of rationality, systems of values, and systems of practices, could be looked upon like an idol on the one hand, or it could also be looked upon as an icon. Okay? When you say a system is being looked upon like an idol, it means you look at that system in a closed way, because what you see in an idol is nothing but the mirror of yourself. You get that? Mirror of yourself. When you, for example, put up systems of rationality, of beliefs, of values, of practices, and we say, no, you cannot touch on that. These are absolutes for me. And you hold on to this in an ideological way, then you're not open. Because all that you see, according to him, is nothing but the projection of yourself. Because what you see there and what you project is yourself. Because the idol is nothing but the mirror of yourself. And anyone, for example, who would attack you, you would be very against, because you would feel that it is you who is being attacked. Depicted as an idol and a mirror and projection of the self, it becomes, the tendency is to be closed. It does not have opening, okay, for it to be able to change, be modified, etc. You understand? But he says that you can also look at the way we think, the way we value things, and the way we practice certain traditions in our lives, not necessarily as an idol, but as an icon. What is an icon? The icon is not a mirror, but the icon is actually a window. But when you look at these particular realities, when you look, for example, at these particular systems, they actually open up for you a much greater reality beyond itself. Because it's just a window. It makes you take a glance further beyond it and move to a certain level of transcendence. It is not about you. It is about what the systems can reveal further to you. You get my point? For example, I became a parish priest, and for example, in some chapels, there would be people who donated the image, okay, of Mama Mary, and then some people would see that it's already very old, it had to be changed, etc. You know, but the one, for example, who donated it would be so attached to it because it is a representation of himself more than anything else. Though the person would feel hurt and would, do everything to be able to keep it. You understand? And in that way, that piece of art becomes an idol. For example, Catholics, when they deal with the sacred objects and they consider that that is the terminal, the end of their devotion, that becomes idolatry. Do you understand? But if, for example, the picture or the image is something that would only lead you to a certain experience of transcendence beyond this piece of wood or this piece of paper or image, then it becomes a window that opens up a much greater reality than what you have initially discovered. Do you get it? Are you with me, or do you have questions? Any question? It's already, sorry, it's already 10. What time should we take a break? Uh, Maybe I will start. I will stop there and then deal with the other two characteristics later on. But for the meantime, would you like to have some questions to ask? Wala?
Father,
Yes.
can you
Go
please
ahead.
repeat what is the meaning of the icon of
Okay.
Jun
The
Lakmagan?
icon, the icon is like the window. It's the window that allows us the possibility to take a glance beyond it, moving toward transcendence, toward the other that you have not initially yet appreciated. So through the window, it makes it possible for you to see further, and you also see the possibility for you to be contested from your own present assumptions and appreciation of reality. Because you see more, and then that allows you the possibility to change. Because you would say, I have not seen that yet before. So the contestation that comes from the other through the window, through the icon, actually makes you go for conversion, for transformation, or for change. So
So
it's
Father, it is
between, yes,
so Father, it is the way how we think the value of a reality.
yes, or any system for that matter, system of thought, system of belief, system of values, system of practices. Okay, so
Thank you, Father.
they should not entrap us. Ang tawag nila doon, yung sa idol, you fall into what people technically refer to as hermeneutic enclosure. Okay, you are trapped within your hermeneutic enclosure, and because of which you become ideological and you become idolatrous. But with icon, no, because it allows you the possibility to constantly change. You move forward beyond yourself because it's not really about you, but it is about the other that reveals further. Okay. It's about the other that contests you, that allows you to change through the window. Any other question? So whether how we, for example, deal with the whole question of moral disarray, I think, uh, as I said, people can opt to just limit themselves within a particular tradition. Okay, we will later on study that the post liberals would do that, or We argue for a more globalized perspective, okay? But at the same time, it could be also ideological. But the point we're saying here is that just as we try to appreciate and hold on to certain anchoring, it is important that as we hold on to them, we remain open, okay, to the contestation of the other, because after all, these things that we hold on opens up new possibilities for us to see. Do you understand? And that seems to form within the logic, the general logic of postmodern sensibilities and sensitivities to the discourse of otherness and alterity. Okay, if there are no more questions, maybe we could break. Can we just take a break for 10 minutes? Is that okay? Because you don't have to talk with anyone anyway.